we're going to be doing completing the square to rewrite an equation. So we're not actually solving it, we're just trying to rewrite the equation. And so we're trying to put parabolas into vertex form. So if we recall, standard form for a quadratic, the one that we're used to working with, is y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. Again, a, b, and c all just represent numbers, but it's the fact that x squared goes first, then your x, and then your number at the end. Again, the number we call a constant. That's our standard form. That's the one that we're used to. Our vertex form is a times x minus h squared plus k. So again, it's just another way of being able to write your quadratic equation. Vertex form is actually very helpful when it comes to answering a lot of different kinds of questions. What ends up happening is when you have it in vertex form is you can see the vertex right away. Your vertex actually comprises of this h and that k. So you're able to pick those values out right away. So the steps to putting it into vertex form are very similar to the steps to solving by completing the square. Make sure it's in standard form first. You're then going to move your c term over and put spaces on both sides of the equal sign. Take your b value, divide it in half, and then square it or multiply it times a half, whichever one you want to do. And then you factor and bring c back over. You don't finish the rest of the steps for solving. So let's take a look at our first example. So for number 1, it's in standard form, y equals x squared minus 2x plus 5. They want us to write it in vertex form and then state the vertex. So first thing we're going to do is bring this 5 over. And that's going to hang out with the y. Y isn't going to go anywhere. So it becomes y minus 5, and then we put a space in there to do our completing the square. So y minus 5 plus a space is going to equal x squared minus 2x plus a space. So then again, to figure out the number that's going to go into that space, I have to take my b value of -2, and I'm going to divide it by 2, which would give me a -1. And then we take that -1 and we square it. So what is -1 squared? +1. So we have +1 that goes on that line. Take your b, divide it by 2, and then square it. So over here, -5 plus 1 just makes that y minus a 4. On the right side, we need to factor it because it's a perfect square trinomial. We just write it as x minus 1. It's always whatever half of b is what goes there and then squared. It would be x minus 1 times x minus 1, but we write it as x minus 1 squared. Then again, since we're not solving, we're just trying to put it in vertex form. We just add our 4 over. And we get y equals x minus 1 squared plus 4. That is our vertex form. So once we had it in vertex form, they wanted us to state the vertex. So to state the vertex, you're going to use these two numbers. Whatever this number is in the parentheses, you're going to change the value of it so that negative becomes positive. And then the 4 on the outside stays the way it is. So you only change the x value, y's value stays the way it is. So our vertex would be the 0.14. All right, let's try it again. Number 2, rewrite y equals x squared plus 8x plus 7 in vertex form, then state the vertex. All right, step 1, it's in standard form. So that's done. Next thing we're going to do, bring this 7 over here with the y and add our spaces. So y minus 7 plus a space equals x squared plus 8x plus a space. So next step, we got to figure out what's going to go in our spaces there. So again, we take our b value, which is 8, divide it by 2, which would give us 4, and then we've got to square it. So what is 4 squared? 16. So we're going to put 16 on those lines. So on the left side, negative 7 plus 16 gives me a positive 9. And then the right side would factor into x plus 4 squared, because it's a perfect square trinomial. It always factors that way. So again, we're just putting it in vertex form, not solving. So I'm just going to bring my 9 back over to the other side of the equal sign. So y equals x plus 4 squared minus 9. That would be our vertex form. So then the vertex, again, we change the value for our x. So this positive 4 would become negative 4. And then the y stays the way it is, so that would stay as negative 9. So negative 4, negative 9 would be our vertex. So then our third one there, rewrite y equals 2x squared plus 16x plus 25 in vertex form, then state the vertex. So this one's a little bit different, because instead of having just 1x squared, we have a 2x squared this time. So if you remember back from our completing the square notes, you can't complete the square if that's anything other than a 1x squared. So the first thing we have to do is we have to make it a 1x squared. I'm going to do that by dividing everything by 2. And now, when I say divide everything, I really mean everything. I can't actually divide y by 2 because I don't have a value right now for y, so I'm going to leave that as y divided by 2. And then that becomes 1x squared plus 8x plus 12.5. 25 divided by 2 gives me the decimal 12.5. And it's okay if you have decimals. Sometimes that's going to happen. So now we have a 1x squared. We are in standard form, so we can go about the rest of our steps. So I'm going to subtract my 12.5 over. So my y divided by 2 minus 12.5 plus my space equals x squared plus 8x plus a space. So then what number is going to go in the space? 16. Good. Because half of 8 is 4. Squared gives you 16. So let's see here, negative 12.5 plus 16 gives me a positive 3.5. Over on the right side there, that factors into x plus 4 squared. So we'll subtract over our 3.5. I'm running out of room, so y over 2 equals x plus 4 squared minus 3.5. So now that we've done all our completing the square steps, I can't leave that as y over 2 anymore. So we got to multiply everything times 2. So when I do that, 2 times y over 2 becomes simply a y. I can't actually multiply my 2 through these parentheses because those parentheses have that squared on the outside of it. So this 2 is just going to stay out in front of it. So it becomes 2 times x plus 4 squared. But I can actually multiply the 2 by my 3.5. So that would become a minus 7. So everything gets multiplied by 2, except for the parentheses. The 2 just hangs out in front of it. So then our vertex is still the same thing. Going to change the value of my x to become negative 4. Y stays the way it is at negative 7. So negative 4, negative 7 is our vertex there. The other one, this one is something that hopefully you remember doing last year in geometry. Writing circles in center radius form using completing the square. So it's the same thing, still doing completing the square, only this time instead of a parabola we have a circle. So standard form for a circle, ax squared plus bx plus cy squared plus dy plus e. Equals 0. Basically, standard form for a circle means everything's over on one side, you have a 0 over there on the other side. And they just keep using different variables for your coefficients. So your a, your b, your c, your d, and your e. Cy squared plus dy plus e. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be taking circles that look like that. We're going to be putting them in center radius form, which is a lot easier to deal with. So that would be x minus h squared plus your y minus k squared equals r squared. That's our center radius form. That's what we want to end up having it look like. Once it's in center radius form, you can easily pick out your center, which are just those two values along with x and y. You do change the signs of them. And then your radius is just the square root of whatever that number is, because that number is your radius squared. So to figure out just your radius, you would just take the square root of it. So again, I explained in there your steps for doing your completing the square. Let's try an example down here. So first things we want to do is we want to move our number over to the other side of the equal sign. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to kind of rearrange things. I'm going to put my x's together. So x squared plus 10x. And then I'm going to put a space in there. Then I'm going to put my y's together. So my y squared minus 6y. And plus a space for that. And then my 75 got moved over to the other side of the equal sign. And then I have to put 2 spaces there, because I put 2 spaces on the left side of my equal sign, one for the x, one for the y. I have to put 2 spaces over on the right side of the equal sign, because whatever you do to one side, you got to do to the other side. You got to keep it equal. So looking just at our x's for now, we're going to do completing the square with the x values. So x squared plus 10x plus space. So what's half of 10? And then square 5. So 25. And then 25 also goes on the other side of the equal sign. So we'll do the same things with our y's. Okay, so I got y squared, so I got to take half of 6. 3, and then 3 squared is 9. And then that goes in our other spaces. So in looking at just your x, you'll factor those ones. So x squared plus 10x plus 25 would become x plus 5 squared. Again, whatever half of that b value is what that number is going to be with the x in the parentheses. Do the same thing with your y. So this would become y minus 3 squared. It would be minus 3 because your 6 here was a negative, so it keeps that sign. And then it equals, let's see here, 75 plus 25 is 100 plus 9 is 109. That's our center radius form. That's exactly what I want it to look like. So from here, your center, you've got to change the values here. So this would become a -5, and that 3 this time would change because it's inside the parentheses. With your parabola, your y value was not in parentheses, so it didn't change. This time it would change. And then our radius would be the square root of 109. I don't think there's a perfect square that goes into 109. Yeah, if there was, you would have to simplify it. But I don't believe there is. I'm trying to go through my head quickly. I don't think there is. Not 81. No, there's not. There we go. So next one, we got to find the center and radius for 2x squared minus 4x plus 2y squared plus 16y equals 6. They kind of helped us out a little bit. They've already, put the number over on the other side. They put the x's together. They put the y's together. But completing the square is not going to work just yet because we have a 2x squared and we have a 2y squared. Those squared terms can't have those numbers in front of it. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a 2 out of everything. So that becomes x squared minus 2x. I'll even put my spaces in now too, because I'm getting ready for completing the square. And then it becomes y squared plus 8y plus a space. And you would even do it on the other side of the equal sign. You'd even take the 2 out of the 6, so that would become a 3. And then plus your spaces. So let's do our completing the square for the x's. Half of 2 is 1. 1 squared is 1. And then we'll do it for the y's. Half of 8 is 4. 4 squared, 16. So for the next part, we're getting ready to factor. That 2 is still going to be hanging out there. It's kind of like your little sister that you brought to the store with you. You don't want her to come in the store with you. So you tell her, you wait out here. So she's still there. You got to bring her home with you, otherwise mom is going to kill you. So she's got to hang out there in the front. For our x's, we would factor that. So that would become x minus 1 squared. For your y's, we would factor that one also. So that would become y plus 4 squared. And then the other side, 3 plus 1 is 4 plus 6 gives us 20. So this isn't the way we'd normally see our answers. What they do now at this point is they multiply back through with the 2, but you can't multiply the 2 through those parentheses, so it just kind of stays out in front. Same thing happens with your y's. You can't multiply the 2 through those parentheses, so it stays as 2 times y plus 4 squared. And then 2 times 20 gives us 40. So for our center, this would be 1, negative 4. Again, change the signs. It was negative 1, so it becomes positive 1. Was positive 4, so it becomes negative 4. And then our radius, there is a perfect square that goes into 40. What is it? 4. Square root of 4 is 2, so this is 2 radical 10. Remember, it's always the square root. or whatever that number is, because that is your radius squared. All right, one more. So we got 4x squared minus 24x plus 4y squared plus 72y equals 76. So we've got to take a number out of that first because I can't have 4x squared or 4y squared. So we're going to take out a 4 this time because that's what's in front of your x squared and your y squared. So it gives me x squared minus 6x plus a space. Remember, everything would get divided by 4. And then y squared plus 18y plus a space. Would equal 19 plus a space plus a space. Everything gets divided by that 4. So let's do our completing the squares. We'll start with our x's. Half of 6 is 3. 3 squared gives us a 9. And then half of 18 is 9. 9 squared gives us an 81. So then factoring here, for our x's, this would become x minus 3 squared. For your y's, that would become y plus 9 squared. Let's see over here. Got 109 again. So now we just have to bring that 4 back through, so it's 4 times x minus 3 squared. 4 times y plus 9 squared. 4 times 109 is 436. So there's our center radius form. What would be our center of our circle here? 3, negative 9. And our radius, the perfect square that goes into this is 4, because I just multiplied 4 times 109. That becomes 2 square root of 109.